Okay, this is 2.3a. We're going to be talking about writing and graphing compound inequalities. So compound inequalities basically means that you have two inequalities here that are combined into one. Okay, so they're going to be using a statement to be able to combine them though. And that's going to be either and or. All right, and depending on that is going to tell you, and depending on which word is used is going to tell you a whole lot about what these compounds are doing. Okay, for instance, and compound inequalities are always going to go in. Okay, they always go in, and it'll make more sense when you guys see the number lines in a second. Okay, but basically what it looks like is this. So say I have a number line written out. Hold on. So I have a number line here. Looks like this. Okay, there's my number line. All right, I'm gonna have two dots on here. One's gonna be here, one's gonna be here. They can be filled or whatever. But an and is always going to have it shaded here in the middle. Okay, always. All right. Now the inequality. Now you guys kind of see that down here in the bottom. These are our and ones. Okay, and you can all see that this is going in, going in, going in, going in. Okay, so when we have these two inequalities, the word or how the inequality looks is going to tell us a whole lot about where the line is going to go. So it can either always go in based on an and, or it can always go out like with an or. Okay, and this is what that looks like. So I have another number line here. Looks like this. Okay, and we'll grab that color, I don't know. So here I have my two dots. They can be open or closed or whatever, it doesn't really matter. But once again, an out means that they're going to be going out like this. Okay, and out like this. All right, as you can kind of see the difference here, these ones are going in here, whereas these ones are going out, away from each other. Okay, so an or is always going to go out and always in. So and is in, or is out. Okay, so how the interval is also going to look is going to be very relevant in all of these. Okay, generally when you have this, when you have an or, you have technically what looks like two lines. So you can have a negative infinity all the way up to a number here. Okay, united or union with another one, or you have another number here all the way to infinity on the end, something like that. Okay, whereas something that looks like this, or an and, is going to only have the number going to its other number over here. Okay, now let's get a couple of examples and I'll show you what. All right, so write and graph and write solution for using the interval notation. Okay, so and means in. Got to remember that. So let's do it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so first we put our circle here on 1. Okay, it's a filled dot because it's still equal to. Okay, right? And we'll go to 5 here, and it's also a filled dot, just like this. Now, what direction is the inequality pointing to with the 1? It's pointing to the right, and this one's pointing to the left. So they're going in towards each other, as you guys can kind of see. So I can fill right here with the 1, and I fill left with 5, and it looks like they're going to fill in this middle area right there. Okay, that is what an and is going to do every single time. Now, for the interval notation, you just have to look at the number line. Because it is a filled dot, right, you're going to bracket it. Same thing on 5. So when we write our interval notation, you can have a bracket with the number 1, because that's our first number, all the way to 5 with the bracket on the back end. Okay? And that's all you got to do. So let's move on and let's look at another example of this. So let's say we have -7 over here and we have 8 over here. Doesn't really matter where we put the dots. Okay? Now -7 is going to be an open one because it's not equal to, it's just greater than. And 8 is going to be equal to. So we have to fill that dot. Okay? It's and means in. So, it makes sense. So you look at the inequality here, it points in. Inequality here, points in. Shade in the middle. Something like that. All right? And since it's an open circle, we're going to throw a parenthesis on it. Yeah, let's make it a different color. Parenthesis on it. And then it's not going to be a parenthesis on the filled dot on 8 because it is a filled dot, so we got to bracket it. So our interval notation for this one will be -7, comma, 8 with a bracket on the 8. Now, sometimes you guys are going to see a different kind of notation for the and statements. Okay, so this is still an and statement, by the way. How can I tell? Where is the x in relation to the 0 and the 10? It's kind of in the middle of them, if you guys can kind of see that, right? So it looks like it's in the middle. And that's relevant because where do you think the line is on A? Well, it looks like it's in between 1 and 5, right? Or if we look at -7 and 8, it's also between -7 and 8 on B. So when the x is in the middle, that also means and. Okay, so that should also influence how we're going to write out our equation. So we have a 0 here, and we have a 10 here. Okay, we have an open circle because it doesn't have a line underneath it here on 0, and on 10, we're going to have one filled because it has a line underneath it for equals. Now, you might be wondering, you might be saying, Mr. Hewlett, how am I supposed... It looks like the line is pointing this direction. Why is that wrong? Well, it's because the x is technically on the right side of 0, and if you guys can remember from 2.1 and 2.2, the x needs to be on the left-hand side of it for it to matter. Okay, so x can still be less than or equal to 10, and if I rewrite it, I quit moving it. If I rewrite it like this, you're going to see that x is pointing, or the 0 is pointing right, 10 is pointing left. They're going in towards each other, and that's exactly what we're looking for. Shade in middle. Okay, and for our interval, we're going to have a parenthesis on the 0, a bracket on the 10. 0, comma, 10. And that's all you got to do. Okay, it's really easy for you if you guys just kind of simplify it and say, well, x is in the middle of these two. And the inequalities, notice how they're going in the same direction. You have to, if you're going to write with an inequality, you have to make sure they go point in the same direction. I can't have two inequalities facing out. Okay, it wouldn't make sense for me to have 2 is less than x, but then it's also less than, I don't know, -1. It doesn't really tell me a whole lot about x other than it's less than -1, but it's still 2 is less than x. It doesn't work really well. Okay, so make sure when you guys are doing your inequalities, you want them going in the same direction. As you guys can kind of see here, when it's written out like this, they're both going left, and that's what I want to see. So on D, where's the m? Looks like it's between -4 and 5. So just again, -4, 5. Look at the inequality. This one has a line on the -4, has a line on the 5, so that means they're equal to. Filled circles, meaning that they're going to have meaning because they have an equal sign underneath it, you got to fill them. Because the m is in the middle, you've got to fill that space in between them. Because once again, this is still an and statement. All right? Write your inequality, just like that. They're both bracketed because they're both filled circles. So -4, 5 is what you're going to be looking at. Okay. So let's look at our or statements now. This is really important that you guys make sure to look, because sometimes they'll trick you. Okay, which of the two numbers is smaller, -6 or 8? Well, clearly -6. And the smaller the number is, the further left on the number line it's got to be. Okay, so -6 is going to be more on the left, because this is where our negatives are, and our positives are on this right side. Okay, so let's look at it. Where is the inequality pointing on x is less than or equal to -6? It's pointing to the left. Okay, so when I put my circle on -6, I want to draw it out. Okay, and the same thing with 8. It's an open circle this time, but again, it's pointing to the right. Put it above it. Okay, so that means we have to draw it to the right. Okay, it matters. It really, really matters that you guys make sure that -6 is on the left-hand side of 8. Okay, numbers go from smallest to largest. -6 is a lot smaller than 8, so you have to make sure it's on the left side. Okay, now for your interval, this is where you guys notice that we have what looks like 2 lines, and you would be correct in saying so. But that also means that we have 2 parts of our interval notation. So when I write it, it's not just going to be 1 like in the ands. So you guys saw how we have like 0, 10 on C. right? It can't be like that. It's going to be two of those technically, okay? So the first one is going to be this left one. So bracket still on the negative 6 is a filled dot. And you have negative infinity, comma, negative 6 with a bracket. But then over here on this side of our inequality, or at least on our number line, oh, my apologies, on our number line, right? We haven't done that one yet, so let's do that. It's a parenthesis on 8 and a parenthesis on the infinity. So this is the second part of our inequality. Now, if you guys look at the notes here, you'll notice that we have this little U thing in between all of our ors. Okay? That is called a union sign. It means that they're united together. Okay? So our entire answer still has to have this U. You can't forget the U, right? We need to make sure that we're using good math grammar is how I like to think of it. So use that U to tell us that those two equations or those two segments of lines are actually united. Go over here, n is negative 2, and or. If it's out, if they say or, it means out. If you guys are if you've noticed that your lines are going together, that means you did it wrong if it has or. Or means out. So when I have the negative 2 here, I've got to put the 0 on the right side, okay? If I were to do this, let's say I did this accidentally. Notice what would happen if I put 0 and negative 2. Okay, well, negative 2 tells us it goes left, and that goes in, and 0 tells us it goes in, but that's an and statement. The reason why this doesn't work is because negative 2 is smaller than 0. Okay, so we have to make sure they go in order. All right, so keep it in line. Put your negative 2 here, put your 0 here, doesn't really matter where we put them right now. Draw a circle, neither of them is filled because they don't have an equal to. Negative 2 is going left, so we're going left with the negative 2. 0 is going right, so we're going right with that. Okay? Draw your inequalities because this is a negative infinity and this is an infinity. For our interval, we have a parenthesis here, parenthesis here, parenthesis here, parenthesis here. Go negative infinity, comma, negative 2, parenthesis, union, 0, comma, infinity. Okay, let's move on to the second page now. Apologize, my dog is bugging me right now. Okay, let's write the compound inequality illustrated by the graph as an inequality and using interval notation. Okay, so I'm going to use here for the inequality, we're going to put pink for this one. And the blue is going to be using an interval notation. All right? So, first, let's use the inequality on this one. Okay? You can kind of see that this is a 0 here and this is a negative 4. I'll just draw them so you guys can actually kind of clearly see them when we do this. All right? So, an inequality for this one, first off, we have to know, is this and or? Well, where's the line going? I'll kind of draw it in a little bit better so you guys can kind of see it. Okay, the line is in the middle. That means it should be an and. Okay, so when I do my inequality, let's look at how we do the and notations. So there's two ways we can possibly do it. We could write and, like they do in problem A, or we can use the compound inequality stuff, where we have x in the middle and the two numbers on the other sides. So let's do that first. So the inequality here would be negative 4, x, and then 0. Okay, now how do we tell what the inequality is? So the inequalities are always going to be facing to the left when you do it like this. Now, this is a filled circle that we have here on, this is a filled circle that we have on 0. Okay, so the one change I'm going to make is I'm going to put a line under the 0. All right. Now, For the interval notation, we're going to change it up. Interval. Okay, it's a parenthesis here, and you got a bracket here. Still going to be the same idea. -4, comma, 0, bracket. And that's your answer right there. That's all you got to do. Now, you don't have to write inequality or interval. We can tell the difference. Make sure you do circle your answers when you are done. Okay, you can kind of see the lines here a little bit. My copy isn't very great, but I'll kind of draw them out a little bit more, right? My line is going out, it looks like, on these ones. Okay, so let's first start off by doing our inequality. Okay, our inequality is this. It's first we have to tell whether or not it's an or versus an and. Okay, because they're going out like O, it's going to be an or in this case. All right, so for an or, you first have to do two inequalities. It's easiest to say, what is the number that we have? It's a -1. What direction is the inequality going? It's going left. X is less than -1. The other one, we can use a union sign in this case, or we can do or. And actually, I think or is better. Let's do or. Okay, and then we can have X. Once again, it's going to the right. So we're going to go point it in the same direction, and then the number 1. Okay, both are unfilled dots, so we don't need these lines underneath it right now. And that's all you got to do. Okay, for the interval notation, let's do -infinity here, right? Positive infinity on this end. For parenthesis, 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 parenthesis. None of them are bracketed because these are unfilled circles. So we have parenthesis -infinity, comma, -1, parenthesis, union, parenthesis, 1, comma, infinity, parenthesis. That's all you got to do. They're your answers. Okay. All right, looks like the line's going out on this one again. Let me redraw them a little bit better. I hate it when it does that. Let me redraw them a little bit better. Okay. If I can. Okay. Yeah. They're a little bit easier to see. Kind of just go through it real fast and I'll fix some of these. I think that's right. Looks like all of them are like that except for the or ones I've already fixed. All right. So moving back to this, start off with your inequality. It's clearly going to be an or, right? So you're going to have two of them because it's an or. So first one, X going to the left, -4. That's going to be a filled circle in this case though, right? So X less than -4 or X greater than -2. But I have made a mistake. What am I missing? They're filled circles. This is equal to on both of these. Okay, you got to make sure that line is underneath it. Done. For the interval. Okay, throw your parentheses. -infinity, parenthesis. And then you got a bracket on this one because it's a filled dot bracket. Then we have infinity on this side. Parenthesis. Zoom out a little bit. Okay, just rewrite it. Parenthesis, -infinity, comma, -4, bracket, union, bracket, -2, comma, infinity, parenthesis. Done. Those are your two answers. Okay, this is obviously going to be an and on this one. Okay, our inequality is therefore going to be have an x in the middle. So we got to set up x. Number here is -2. Number here is 4. All you got to do. Okay, both of them are open circles, so no need for lines in this case. All right, and that's all you got to do. So I think the and inequalities are really easy. You just can't get yourself tricked and understand that they have to go in a certain direction when you do draw them. Interval. Okay, our interval notation, well, that's a parenthesis, and that's obviously a parenthesis because they're both unfilled. So you go parenthesis -2, comma, 4, parenthesis. Done. Okay, ends are really nice. They're also easy to screw up. So biggest thing that I want you guys to understand from all of this, or some quick notes I might throw here at the end and I'll talk about them, just make sure to write them down if you can. And we'll do that in a sec. Okay, first off, in is and. Inequality. Okay, if it's an inequality, x is in the middle, 2 inequalities. But both of these dots are filled, so we're going to miss something on this. We got to make sure those lines go underneath them. Okay, -4 is on the left, 2 is on the right. Done. That's all you got to do. Interval notation. Okay. Our interval notation in this case is going to be a bracket on that left side, and we got a bracket on the right side too. So, -4, comma, 2. Bracketed. Done. Okay, and there are your answers. Here, one last and I want to say, but you guys should probably be getting pretty decent at these. So, as you already heard me say, it is an and in this one. Okay, maybe I'll throw those up here as well. Okay, that one's an and, that one's an or. So our and in this one is going to be an inequality start. Reminder, you do not have to write inequality on these. I'm just doing it so you can see it. Okay, it's an and, x is in the middle. Now what do you guys notice about this one that's a little bit different? One side is unfilled and the other one is filled. So the right side here is going to be a filled dot, but this one is not a filled dot on that left side. So that means that this one on the left side does not have a line, but the one on the right does. Put your numbers here, -1, 5, and that's all you got to do. You're done. Okay? For our interval, parenthesis, bracket. Done. Parenthesis -1, comma, 5, and a bracket. And that's your answer. Okay. Here's what I want you guys to take away from this. And one last quick note that I'm going to throw here in red at the very end. Okay. So, the two lines cannot go in the same direction. Okay, what does that mean? Here, I'll show you. So for an example here, I cannot have a number line here in white. I'll use two lines. Oh, I really could have done two colors here. That would have been perfect. So let's say I have one line here that goes left, right? I cannot have another one over here that also goes left like that. That's a no-go. That does not work, okay? Never do that. Because it's not an and it's not an or. Both lines do not go in the same direction at ever, okay? In every single case that we have up here, you can kind of see they're either both going out, like here our lines are showing, or they're both going towards the inside for our ands, okay? Both going in. But they're both going opposite directions no matter what. That's something that you guys have to be very aware of, all right? So you zoom out real fast to make sure you guys have this all written down, okay? Pause the video whenever you need to, if you need to write some of this stuff down, okay? All right, there you go. If you guys have any questions, make sure to ask your teacher.